Hi there, and welcome to the High Business Series. I'm Kylie Ingram, the CEO and co-founder of Wizer, and today we're talking about something we all struggle with, why some asks land and others don't. We've all put forward a good idea and watched it go nowhere, while someone will say something what we think sounds the same and it gets traction. The truth is, it's often not the idea, it's how the message meets or misses the decision styles in the room. To help us unpack this, I'm joined by Dr Juliet Bourke, one of the world's leading thinkers on cognitive diversity and decision-making. Juliet's research on the 6 lenses of decision-making has influenced boards, executives globally, and forms the foundation of Wizer's decision profiles. Welcome, Juliet. Thank you for joining us.
Hi, Kylie. Thanks for having me. Hi, everyone.
And so, Juliet, where do we want to start? Should we start by explaining what you mean by decision frameworks? Is that
okay? Yeah, sure. So some research that we did looking at how people think about things, and that when we say think about things to make a decision, showed us that people bring these sort of 6 discrete lenses to the topic. So when they're trying to solve a complex problem, they may think about it in terms of, what are the outcomes that we're trying to achieve? And of course, everyone thinks about it a bit in terms of the outcomes, but some people have that as their sort of singular, almost dominant frame. I'd say a bias towards thinking that way. And that's positive. We need people to think about it in that way. Other people think about it in terms of options, what are the alternatives? What else could we do? What's been done before. Other people dominantly think about it in terms of risk, what could go wrong, what do we need to plan for, evidence, what's the data that we have that's grounding this decision, how do we measure the decision as an outcome. And then some people think about it in terms of people, sort of stakeholders, capabilities, and then other people would think about it in terms of processes, how to get from A to B, what are the steps in between. So if you think about those sort of outcomes, options, risk, evidence, people, process, you need all of them to make a good quality decision. But each of us tend to land on one as a primary and maybe a secondary and really emphasize that in our decision making. I know we want to talk about communication, but that's the starting point.
And did it surprise you that people landed on one when you did the research, like that they were so heavily weighted to, one and a secondary?
Yeah, what a great question. I've never been asked that before. I wasn't even looking for that, actually. I was trying to map the different ways that people think about things. I hadn't realized that people had these sort of primary and secondary lenses. So I guess it did surprise me. I kind of figured we could all do all of them. And there was sort of, I don't know if you've come across that work on sort of thinking hats. There was this idea that was sort of the 1980s that you could put on a hat, that you could become the black hat or whatever. And I guess what I saw is that people can't really do that with any level of depth and capability. You can do it at a superficial, but if you're a real black hatter, if you're really into sort of that critical analysis risk, you are a master at that. And I put my cards down on the table. I can't pretend to be you. So I think that was the surprise, that you can't fake it. People have learnt to think this way over a long period of time. And so a better way of thinking about diversity of thinking is put your cards down when someone thinks deeply about a problem in a way that you don't, and pick your cards back up again when you can add value.
It's just made me realize we need to have another discussion about, how they have these they'll do stakeholder groups and they'll put people in to represent that. It's quite funny, even thinking about that role play, isn't it?
Yeah. And there's been really good studies done on that, sort of authentic diversity, let me use that word, as opposed to, practicing to be that person. Yeah.
And one of the fascinating things you found too, before we move on to comms, is leaders fell heavily into one of the 2 kind of frameworks, didn't they?
Yeah, and you know what? I saw that the other day. So they fell into the framework, particularly in Australia. It could be different in other cultures, but what I saw in Australia was that leaders tended to be very outcomes oriented. What is it that we're trying to achieve? What does success look like? But also options oriented. What else could we do? What's been done before? And those two categories account for sort of 75% of the way that top leaders think about things. Look, it's probably a bit the same in countries that are similar to us, but there are some countries where you can see differences. There might be some countries that are more process-oriented at the top of the organisation. It did surprise me to see that, if that's the other question. I didn't know what the profile of leaders would look like, but I should have taken your guidance and looked at the comms, what comes out of their mouth, how they talk about things, then I would have known. The other day I was reading something on LinkedIn. Someone sent me something on LinkedIn. They know my work well. And this senior leader was telling people, every time I get things, I always get the answer. I always get the outcomes given to me. What I want to hear is options, And she was writing back, you better have a look at Juliet's work, because he couldn't hear that is a dominant frame of his peers. He would be preaching to the choir if he tells people who are senior leaders, hey, you need to give more options, because that would be 75% of them are saying, yeah, options or outcomes.
I remember having a conversation with you some months back, maybe been longer than that, but about the communications piece. You were saying, I'm really interested in this part. And I always thought, with Wizer, when we ask a question, we should separate it into 6 or 7 different ways it's asked so that it is received well. What do you wish we knew about the way, everyone's decision style maps to that communication? I think that
it's
good example.
It's a one-to-one mapping, right? Because what's in our heads is what we think is important when we're talking about a decision that we've made. And we also have this bias to want to communicate that to someone else. And we don't really think about the person on the other end who's receiving that information. Is that how they think about the problem? So we tend to anchor it in what we think is the most important facet of the problem and the most important aspect of the problem that we want to communicate. And I would definitely say I have been guilty of that. And, if you read any of my work, it's filled with loads of facts and it's got lots of footnotes in it. And, that's my background, right, is I'm very evidence oriented. And, I think that is important for me to know, to be comfortable with something that I'm talking about. And so I would assume that that's really important for the person on the other end as well. They would want to hear that information. And I guess what I learnt with the communication piece is that all of us are listening for that bit of information which speaks to what we think is important from a sort of cognitive perspective. So, angling the content of what you want to say so that it includes, if you're speaking to me, a few facts and figures, means that I am more likely to lean into what you're saying rather than leaning back and waiting for you. Yeah, that's very interesting, but, show me the numbers kind of idea. So, yeah, I actually think there's a one-to-one mapping.
Yeah, interesting. Well, as we've started to look at this more, what I've noticed is people's concept of personalisation has nothing to do with decision styles. They'll often say, Juliet, how's the family or the whatever, but that's not going to make a decision, is it?
No, and also I think even that kind of misses things. I remember there was a leader that I had, and she would constantly ask me about my family, and I'd be like, I'm not interested in talking about my family with you. Can we just talk about the work that we've got to do together? So even that, I get where that is going to, which is we want to make sure that we are having relationships with people, but relationships with people based on what they might think is important, not what you might think is important, is also part of it. But definitely how you... Oh, good. Katie's got a question here.
Oh, she's kind of... I think the bit that comes up a little bit later. So yes,
we'll answer that question, Kate. It's a great question. But just going back to that idea that we're wanting to communicate in a way that they need to hear, not our default setting. If I could just wrap up where that conversation was going to.
100%. Yeah. So how can we learn what our our dominant
frame is? Yeah, let's answer that question directly, because it is a great question, Katie. I think there's kind of two ways of doing it. I think one is definitely self-reflection. If you could ask yourself the question, or imagine yourself in a room and there's a conversation going on around you and you only get to ask one question before the problem is solved. Would you ask a question about, what really are the outcomes? If we thought about the options, tell me about the evidence, or what process are we going to do to make this real? It's something that you feel has been missing from that conversation, and you feel this discomfort in yourself because you just feel like there hasn't been enough said on this topic. I think that's one way of doing it, force yourself to make a selection. The other way of doing it is to get feedback. And I think you can get feedback in two ways. One is you can ask people who know you well. Look, on the law of averages, what do I always tend to talk about? What is it, I remember someone saying this to me on the weekend, and I was like, oh my God, you know me so well. She's like, you're always so curious. You always want to go one level deeper. You always want to do that, and she's very people oriented. So she would be much more about, how are the stakeholders engaging with this? And she had a very different take. So you can see yourself in juxtaposition to other people, and they can see themselves in juxtaposition to you. So ask other people who know you well, or look at your own communications about things. But yeah, getting feedback. What do I always tend to talk about or always tend to ask about? And let me say, I think there are primaries and secondaries. I think I can do a good people as a secondary, but what's my primary lens on decision making, and therefore communicating in that style?
And we've also attacked your research, so we've also got decision profiles that you can do anytime online, which will give you that.
Yeah,
and when you go into your bit, it'll show you which of Juliet's 6 frameworks work for you as well. And it's free. Have a go.
Yeah. No, thank you for doing that, Kylie. I think what you've done with the frameworks is great. You're the first to actually bring it to life in a way that has got some rigor behind it. Mine are very sort of analog ways of doing it. I think yours is a much more sophisticated way of doing it. And then when you get that decision profile back, and Katie, I'd be super interested if you go onto Wizer and have a look, give us some feedback on it, or give Kylie feedback on it. Then, does that resonate for you? Does that resonate for other people in how they understand you?
100%. All right, back to, sorry, here I am live. I started my my career in live television, and maybe I shouldn't have gone back into it.
Look at that. Impressive.
I don't know. Oh, well, they make it a lot easier than it'll make it a hell of a lot easier than it used to be, I must say. Troy's thinking, what's the evidence or application for frameworks in speeding up better decisions?
Oh, Troy, great question. And thank you for leaning into my bias. So we did have a look at, what the outcomes were. And let me say, I don't think it's about speed. I think it's about the outcome that you get, because I did run a test once where we gave people the opportunity to come up with they had an hour to come up with a solution to a problem, and the other team also had an hour to come up. So we could put them in the same time, but it was the quality of what came out of it. So the first one, where we gave them an hour and said, just, go for your life, they did this random brainstorming, and, everyone came up with their idea, and, you sort of whiteboard it, and what do you think about it? There was no structure to it. And so therefore, within that hour, they came up with stuff, but it was really, it was random, right? Random brainstorming came up with random stuff. What a surprise. And there is evidence, much better than that, to show that random brainstorming feels good, but it doesn't actually give you quality outcomes. You can become very dominated by one person's voice in the room. For example, some voice might not be in the room. But the second one, we said, okay, think about this problem. And then we divided the people up into, okay, do you think you're more outcomes oriented? Do you think you're more process oriented? Break up, answer the question in the way that you like to think about it, and then play your response back to the group. Now, the hard part was integrating all those different ideas at the end, and that takes time. But the quality of what we got out of the second group was higher than the quality of thinking that we got out of the first group. And the ultimate answer is that when we ask people about sort of, it's two sorts of research here, but one, reflecting on the quality of the innovation that you've come up with compared to not having a diverse thinking group, what number would you put around that? And we sort of consistently heard from people, it's about plus 20%. So it's not saying, we can't do innovation without diversity of thinking. We can, but we can get a premium quality. And to what degree do you plug those gaps, the mistake gaps? And this comes out of Professor Scott Page's work. And any decision that you make that has the same type of people in the group builds in a mistake hole of about 30%. So you can erode the mistake hole. But what Kylie's done with snaps was there was always a third element to the outcomes. And the first element was increased innovation. Second was decreasing risk mistakes. But what I also found, which was definitely a surprise, was not looking for it, was you can increase the followership of stakeholders when you have a diverse thinking group, because they look at that decision and they perceive that their voice was included. So they're more likely to trust. And I've got a story around that, Kylie, if you want me to.
Yeah, no, hit us with it. Let's get back to the
Let's go.
Yes.
Try see if this works for you. But there was this leader, she had been reading my work, and she was the chief strategy officer, and she had to give a presentation to about 1,000 people. And I didn't give her this idea. She kind of thought it for herself. She thought, I don't know these 1,000 people in the room. I haven't done an assessment of them. I can understand myself, but I haven't done an assessment of them. And I could never, understand the weighting of that group, even though they were a group of leaders, and she might have a hunch that they were more outcomes and options oriented just because of where they sit in the hierarchy. So she said that she was going to give this presentation on strategy, and she diligently went through it, and she made sure that she had a message there for the people who are very process oriented, the message for the people who are very risk oriented. And she said later to me that it was the best presentation that she had ever given in terms of the reception she received from it. She felt like the message was heard by a far broader group of people than previously she would have conversed with.
Did she adapt the one question, or she just made sure that there were sections that they would hear, or the parts she wanted them to hear, or how,
she went, I think what I remember for it is she went through the whole of her presentation again, and she made sure that everyone had a point of engagement or multiple points of engagement. So she was reviewing her presentation to make sure that the messages contained words and sentiment that crossed all 6 profiles. And therefore she was giving herself the best chance. So it was throughout the whole thing. It wasn't like, here's a section for the risk people, here's a section. It was like woven in throughout. And so subtly that I don't think people would have really cottoned on to what she was doing. That they just felt like, I get what you're saying. And therefore you can imagine, she's chief strategy officer. She wants people to follow the strategy. She was going to have a higher level of compliance.
Well, I think if you take what you're saying on board too, it changes so much. It changes outreach marketing, where I think a lot of the AI that's doing stuff is rewriting or looking at personality they say this person is this, which is probably one of the better ones, or they're rewriting it in the style you write in. They look at the way you write it on LinkedIn, but if you're going high up the LinkedIn change, no one's writing their own LinkedIn too. Or AI is writing it all. And it's a outreach is one of the biggest problems, isn't it?
It really is. I think for those people who you can see, and I did this with your snaps, I was like, I'm going to test this and see if it works. And I put in someone's LinkedIn profile, and I know that she would have written it herself because I know her well. And I was like, okay, I'm going to scrape some data here and put it into your snaps. And I'm like, okay, I think this person is oriented in this way. What do you think? How should I structure my communications to them? And it was fantastic. Like it absolutely said, this person is more relationship oriented, but also she's very outcome oriented, which is true. So she's kind of both things. And therefore, if you're going to structure your communications to her, make sure that you frame it in this way and frame it in that way. But I think you're right. I mean, I think with AI sort of blamanging, vanillaizing,
homogenizing, yep.
Yeah. Homogenizing our communications, we're at risk if we rely upon those of speaking to no one. They don't really speak to the person. So I think you're right about personalization in this context of influencing a stakeholder. It is about matching their communications, because you're trying to get them to make a decision, which is do this. So it is a decision, and therefore communication about a decision using the sort of 6 different ways of thinking about things is a bit more successful than just communicating in the way that you like to be communicated with.
Yeah, we're seeing that success. We've got a couple more questions, which is going to take us backwards before we go forward. Not backwards, but
in a loop.
In the loop. We'll get to stakeholder. Well, that's not a question. That's just Troy saying thank you, which is nice.
That's good. But he's got it right. Quality of decisions.
Yeah, exactly.
His push. Yeah.
We've been talking about this in terms of cognitive drift, which is really resonating with people, because you talk
cognitive
about
drift. Nice.
Yeah, we've written some blogs on it that I can put down the bottom, but I'll let you answer this. I just write on your research coattails.
Okay. No, I like it. You're framing it like, great media response here. We call it cognitive drift, and I'm going to use that word now because I do think that's right. I think what we see in the same way that we see in any hierarchy, we see demographic diversity, which is more obvious, more visible, changing. We see greater visible diversity, and then when we get to the top of organizations, we see it become much more homogenous. And the same thing happens in terms of cognitive diversity. Much harder to see, but we certainly saw it in the data. And you might see it as well when you're talking to people. And that is that when you enter into an organization, there is greater diversity of thinking. Now, it's never a sort of, an even spread. There are fewer people who tend to think from an evidence point of view, fewer people who tend to think from a risk point of view. It's about 5%. But you have more people who think about things from a process point of view and a people point of view, as well as outcomes and options. And what you start to see as you climb up the ranks is a sort of a stripping away, this sort of, what did you call it? This cognitive drift.
Cognitive
people tend
drift,
to
it leads
drift.
to cultural drift. It's dreadful, Juliet.
it's good. But you see people moving in the direction of what is valued by the senior leadership. And the senior leadership, if they're valuing outcomes and options, you see people drifting into that. So where at the bottom, it's much more sort of like 25%, in a sort of distribution. By the time, as I said, you get to the top of the organization, it's 75% who are thinking about outcomes and options. Where you don't see the drift is in relation to evidence and risk, though that 5% tend to maintain that as they go up. It's a sort of a unique way of thinking about it, but it seems to be a bit resilient. I don't know why, but it goes up. So you see drift, that's true. But what you also see is selection bias. So what I mean by that is the people at the top of the organization are choosing people to advance who think like them. We see it in terms of visible diversity, who look like them, who have the same life experiences as them. But we also see it in the way that people think about things. And and this is where the work started for me, interestingly. When I had joined Deloitte as a partner in 2011, I had this very formative experience where I was in a meeting and we were being asked to make a decision about something, and the leader in that group was like, had the whiteboard going up and, here's all of the options that we could do, and now let's get to the outcome. And I said, look, I just don't feel that I can make a decision here because you actually haven't shown me any evidence of anything. You've just like made things up, put them on a whiteboard and then said, make a decision. And I need some more. And another senior leader was in the room listening and said to me, oh, Juliet, can't you make a decision? Because he was very outcomes oriented. They were used to that pace. I had, prior to this, been a tribunal member. So as a lawyer previously, I had sat on tribunals and I had made decisions day in, day out. I knew I could make decisions. So I knew that his framing was wrong. It wasn't about me not being able to make a decision, but it was the first time that I sort of came up against this, leaders being valued and endorsed and not questioned if they made decisions in the same way as everyone else. And I was rubbing up against that. So it was a very formative experience for me. And I was like, what's going on here? I hadn't had that before, but it showed me selection bias, because if I'd been junior in that situation, I would have adapted to that leader, or I would have been selected out of the opportunity for promotion.
100%. You learn what you need to do, what kind of decision making you need to be.
Yeah.
Interesting. All right. So let's go back to communications and we're going to do something wild here today. We're going to do a demo. Okay. We've never done it before. Who knows what will happen here? But let's talk about snaps that we built. And it came from a foundation recently reached out to me and said, could we use the decision profiles to work out what to send bequesters? Because say they've got a $20 million budget, $10 million comes from bequesters, and it's a really hard job. They've got a lot of people in it. We said, well, of course, how else would you be talking to them? Which then took me down a rabbit hole of learning how people reach out to people. And I should have known, because I get the emails from all sorts of charities. And Juliet and I had a chat at the time about what we'd kind of need to know to make a speculative decision profile, and then look at how to communicate with that person. So let's go wild and let's try and do a demo. Oh, look at that. Okay, so this is what we have for snaps. Now we're going to do, I don't know, Juliet doesn't know what I'm going to do, but I'm going to do Jason Bourne, because everybody knows who he is, and he might be cool. Yeah, so I've got a little blurb already written for him, and he's former CIA operative. He probably hates receiving emails, to be fair. So we're going to say what we know about him. What I've realized too with this, the more you write it yourself, the better the outcome, because if you do it through AI, I've got to work this out, because if you do it through AI, you get a bit of an AI glow. It makes everybody sound really nice. So you've got to ask it to go beyond. And if you use LinkedIn, I don't think a lot of leaders, as we were discussing before, put their own comms in. So that can be difficult. So you've got to really put it, you get the best, data in is always data out. You get the best results if you put in what you know about the people. And what we've realized from people's databases is they don't know a lot about people that's relevant to their decision style, which is interesting. They might have these.
So a suggestion that I would have here, though, is that if you have seen anything that they've written, so a transcript of a speech, they say, of course, speeches are written by other people, but where you can tell that that person has gone off script and they're speaking about it by themselves, that's a good way of doing it too.
Yeah, and also just getting their emails that you have in your inbox works well as well.
Yeah.
But we're just, we're faking it with Jason, because he's never sent me an email. Okay, so now I've got the communications with this person, and I've taken the name of the organization out. Hopefully no one's on the call, because really I've taken a real email here. And it's from a theatre company that's writing to Jason about, donating. It's the end of financial year. And then we can ask it to analyze its comms based on formal, neutral. We'll just go neutral, analyze the comms. And it's going to decide what we're doing right and what we can improve upon. So we know Jason's an analyzer, so we've got a clear deadline, got tax deductibility in there. The risk is the message leans heavily on emotional and abstract language. lack of specific dates, phrases like curtain is closing, alive and vibrant might not work with him, and the call to action is emotionally framed rather than logically justified. You're an analyzer, aren't you?
I'm loving this. I'm like, oh my God, this is so right. I can imagine Jason Bourne reading this and he's like, you know what, I've got
well, he doesn't have time to donate anyway. He's too busy dodging bullets.
He's not an emotional, you're not going to get to him emotionally, you know?
No.
He needs, this is so great.
And then it's suggestions for your analyzers. And so then over here, it's rewritten the communications for you. It's got a lot more what the donation enables, empowerment for the 150 artists. And it's writing, it's also not just, it's not going to write you the same email each time. It's still knowing what Jason likes. So it's individualized. So then also once we've got that, it pops it into a dashboard.
Sorry. Yeah. Did you see the email that was rewritten? It's the starting line was, you've got 1 day left. That is so Jason, like he works under pressure, right?
Yeah, true. Very true. Well, it's here.
That's really good. There's just 1 day left.
It's quite remarkable. Like I've watched people use it and I've known what full decision profile people have. And I thought, oh, it's not going to get it based on what this person's writing about them. But it's one of those tools that's like, you're like, oh, wow, it's also a bit of fun. Good. But so we've got it. Once you go into your back end here, you can kind of then open them up and see what you wrote about Jason and what our original message was. And then that, and what I had this lady in Canada use it. She was like, she got Wizer pretty quickly. And she said, oh, collaborators must get Wizer really quickly. So you'll see the other names behind us are all CEOs.
So you call them collaborators. I call them people.
Yeah, you call them people. Sorry.
Yeah, yes. But that's what you mean. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. That's what I mean. People, not necessarily people. They just see the value of people in a.
No. That's right. I agree. So a person has a people orientation. For me, is someone who looks at the stakeholders, who looks at capabilities, who looks at motivations. You know, they take a people lens to the decision that they're making. That's what I mean by. I don't mean someone who's sociable.
No. And that when we first did it, we had that a bit wrong because that was what it was coming out as, and we've since reframed it. But yeah, we've been looking for collaborators in the top 1,000 CEOs in Australia, which has been it's actually quite fun. It's quite fun to do. And I think one of the things we've seen, and I don't know, I think what I'm seeing too is, I think collaborators write a lot of the messages is what I think I'm seeing by using the tool.
Yeah, my hunch would be that there would be more of that style of thinking in people who come out of comms and marketing, because they're all about stakeholder engagement. So they're writing it from that sort of people-based lens, would be my hunch for the people who are senior executives. So I wouldn't assume necessarily that the most senior people are writing it themselves, but they have to sign off on it. So it's still a reflection of them, but if they read it.
Well, I guess they're leaving also, probably not micromanaging it all. I also know a woman that's using it for every meeting she goes into now. So she's like, before she goes in, she's writing the notes she knows on them. And she was saying to me, it's made a huge difference in the way she approaches, because I think we often bring ourselves to a meeting, which is what we're supposed to.
But it's not bringing yourself to the meeting. It is saying, as we know, you're adapting your style or your message to the audience that are in front of you. And I think that is a common thing to say. But then we go, well, yeah, but how do I adapt it? Like, what is the change that I make? And I think if you think about these different ways of communicating, it gives you a framework to then say, did I hit the note right if this person is oriented that way? And I love what you've done. And because you showed me the analyzer one, which is what I would call an evidence person, I have just done the validation for you, which is like, if you sent Jason Bourne's email to me, I would be like, oh, I'm on it, and that's the other test, right? Send it to someone who is that way inclined and see if it resonates for them.
I've been sending a couple of cheeky emails going, oh, look, this Wizer Snap says this, you are this. And I think people are just intrigued by being a little bit of profiling on themselves. They've found it a funny way to engage them too.
Yeah. And there are people, and I do know them, with someone in my team, actually 2 people in my team who were definitely sort of 50-50. So I talk about it as primary and secondaries, and they were definitely 50-50. So I think we need to make sure with those people that we're actually having 2 messages, that we don't bias it too much in one direction. Because I think people usually have a primary and a secondary. Some people have a tertiary. No one goes further than that.
Yeah, interesting. It's fascinating, and it keeps us on our toes on the research. All right, we've got 3 more things that I've come back to the screen so I can see. Oh, well, I can give you more on cognitive drift.
Yeah, interesting. A great term. We're all going to start using it now. Thanks, Kush.
Yes, no problems. You can, it was your research. I've just given you a little name.
Yeah.
Reza?
Prompt libraries.
Oh, we're talking, yeah.
Okay, prompt engineering. I think, Reza, you should be the one answering that question. You know so much more about prompt engineering. So we'll be looking to you for an answer to that question. So anyone who's watching, you can follow Reza, part of Diversity Atlas. Love Reza's work. So back on you, Reza, for an answer to that one.
Yes, and the Diversity Atlas guys helped us a lot when we were building out that, because there's a diversity, outward-facing diversity piece in Wizer, and they were so helpful in that structure of that when people are doing their profiles, which was fantastic.
I think the bottom line answer, Reza, is yes. But I'd like to see more from you about how prompt engineering can actually help us if we have the right prompts, right? Think about this, and using personas in prompts. I'm sure there's a way that we could get around that neutralizing that we're getting out of AI.
We see a lot of people now using AI in decisions, bots to make the decision based on a type. And the other research that came out a few weeks ago was AI picks itself. So if your resume is written by that, or your bank loan statement, they're picking the ones that are written by bank loans. So what does that mean for people in lower socioeconomic countries and things like, or groups that aren't using AI? So, and then
but there's
decision staying. Yeah, sorry, Julia.
But there's a bias against it as well. So what I have also seen in recruitment is that it's being picked by AI and discarded. So if your resume was written by AI, it looks like everyone else's and it gets discarded. So your ability to differentiate yourself becomes important.
Maybe people is the key to part of these problems, keeping people in the job. And we have Rani. I'm glad you think it's a great discussion. Thank you.
Yeah, I agree. Thanks, Rani. Did you have anything else you wanted to ask, Kylie?
No. No. I just wanted to thank you. Do you have anything else to bring up?
No. I think what you. So just. Anyone who knows me well knows that I rarely give endorsements around products, but I've just given one to Diversity Atlas. I really love what Diversity Atlas does. That's Reza, and definitely what you've done around Wizer, Kylie. I think it's really, really good, really helpful for people. So quick to use. So,
thank you.
There's good job.
Well, we're only just starting, aren't we? So the journey will continue for a long time to come. And what I love about it is just so rich, isn't there? There's so much to explore. There's no end to what, we can be doing. We've just got one more quick question.
And then while we're getting that quick question, I just want to give a shout out to Katie O'Keefe, who gave us some feedback on the tool itself. So I think anyone who's going to try and use the tool, definitely Kylie's open to feedback on it. I give her feedback regularly, but it is a process of refining. You do. You're very good at it.
100%. If you can't listen, I think it's the quickest way to die as a fast moving startup. If you can't listen to feedback.
Yeah, it's true. Yeah, I think that's
Very
sounds like Kush, you and Reza need to have a conversation on LinkedIn.
Yes. Oh, we like connecting people too, so that's always good. But Juliet, thank you for joining us today.
Pleasure.
I always love the conversations I have with you, and the fact we're sharing it with others is great. And I think what it shows that influence isn't about being louder or more persuasive. It's about framing your communication so it connects how people decide. And a huge double thank you, because Juliet has actually given us her book, Which Two Heads Are Better Than One, available for half price on our website. So I can put I think I've even done there's a little code up there. I'm on fire today with the.
You are so on fire. I'm so impressed with your tech. That's really good.
Well, it makes it easy. But yeah, so you can get the QR codes for Snaps and Juliet's books there. And if you do want to try Snaps, I've set up a little special code under Juliet 10 that'll give you 10% off when you sign up. So, we'd love you to try it. And even, there's a free bit in there. So give us feedback anywhere along the way. We want to kind of know what you want us to build next. But Juliet, thank you so much for your time again today. I appreciate it. And I always love our conversations because I'm so into what you've done and what we're building.
Thank you. And thanks to everyone who's come today and shown interest, and nice to see some friends as well. And hopefully reach out to me on LinkedIn. If you heard this, if you've got any questions, I'd love to discuss it with you more, but great to see some friends again too.
Wonderful. Yes. Thank you all for joining us.